Hey you guys, Ms. Gosling here. In this video, you're going to learn how to create graphs for your science fair project. Just a note, this is also the kind of graphing you should have for your IA and for any major labs that we do in class. So this should hopefully be pretty useful for you moving forward. This video is expanding on my previous video, which looks at science fair data analysis. If you've not watched that video, you may not understand where my numbers in columns H through K come from. So I would recommend going back and taking a look at that video if you have not seen that already. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my graph. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Insert. I'm going to go to Charts, and I'm going to be inserting a scatter plot. I want just a plain scatter plot with nothing except for dots. I do not need lines connecting my data. This is not a nice scatter plot. So we're going to do a plain scatter. And what this is doing is this is kind of a random amount of data that it's looking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and immediately select data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, click where it says error bars, and I'm going to hit edit. I'm going to just give it the name data. It doesn't really matter what you call it. My X values, though, are going to be my IV. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead, you'll see I clicked the thing that looks like an arrow pointing up. And then I'm going to click in column A2 and drag down until all of my levels of the IV are highlighted. Then I'll hit enter. I'm going to do the same thing with my dependent variable. So I'm going to go ahead again, I'm going to hit upload. I'm going to click in my average column, and I'm going to drag down until all of my DV values are highlighted. Now you'll notice I am just graphing my average values. I am not graphing any of my trials. Remember that all of your trials are encapsulated in your average, and your average is more accurate than any of your trial data. So once you've done your trials, you do not need to worry about them anymore since you've calculated your average, you've calculated your statistical uncertainty, and that is what's going to be in our graph. So here I have my data in my graph. So I'm going to go ahead, click OK, OK again, and there is my graph with my correct X and Y values. Now I already have a chart title. It is not correct, but it's there. So I'm going to go ahead and add the other elements that I want before I start editing elements. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add axis titles, a trend line, and error bars. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to edit each of those elements one at a time so you can see what I'm looking for. So first of all, your axis title should be whatever your IV is, and then the units for IV. So the way that IB likes to see this is IV, the name of your IV, so like mass, and then slash and the units for your IV. So if my IV is mass, for example, I would write mass / kilograms. If it's length, I would do length / meters, and so on and so forth. The dependent variable on the y-axis is going to have the exact same format. So again, it'll be, if my dependent variable is temperature, I would write temperature / degrees Celsius. If it's weight, I could do weight / newtons, and so on and so forth. The title for my graph is going to be of the form dV versus IV. So for example, weight versus mass, velocity versus acceleration, or whatever your dependent and independent variables are. So that is my titles. That's the easy part. Next, we're going to go ahead and edit our trend line. So for my non-IB students, if you have a trend line, so for all of my students, you want to have some theory depicting that you use to determine the shape of your trend line. So for example, if you expect the relationship between your IV and DV to be linear, then you want a linear trend line. But you want to be able, if it's not linear, you want to be able to explain why. So why is it decreasing? Or why is it increasing exponentially? For my non-IB students, you do not, for my IB1 students, you do not need to go beyond just justifying the shape of your trend line. For my IB2 students, you're going to have to linearize if it's not linear. We've talked about how to do this, but if you're having trouble, again, please just let me know. I'm happy to go over it with you again. So with my trend line, what I want to do, regardless, So for my IB2 students, this is only for your linearized trend line. For my IB1 students, this is for whatever trend line you have. What you're going to do is, again, you're going to double click where it says trend line, click on the little picture that opens this format trend line box up. You'll click on the little thing that looks like a bar graph, scroll down, and click the box that says display equation on chart. I like to move my equation around so that it's something useful. And I also like to edit my equation. So instead of y, I write whatever my dependent variable is. And instead of x, I write whatever my independent variable is. So for example, if my dependent variable is temperature, I might use capital T. And my independent variable is mass, I can use m. And I'll use to replace x and y because it's more accurate, it's more meaningful to my data. So that's my trend line. Next, let's go talk error bars. So I'm going to start by editing my horizontal error bars. You'll notice when I click them, that actually automatically opened the menu. If it doesn't, just double click, it'll open the menu for you. Again, we want to be in this section with that looks like a little bar graph. I'm going to scroll down to where it says error amount, and I want to select custom. Then I'm going to select specify value. For my positive error value, I want that to be my uncertainty for my IV. So I'm going to click equals, click and drag to highlight all of my columns with my uncertainty for IV. I'm going to do the same thing for the dependent variable. Again, for the negative error values. So what this is saying is that my average values have an equal chance of being too high as they do of being too low, which is what we want to see. So that's going to change those error bars. And I'm going to do the same for my Y error bars. Again, I'm going to double click my Y error bars to open the menu. Make sure I'm in this little section with a bar graph, scroll down, hit custom, specify value. I'm going to make my positive error bars the column that says error bars, and my negative error bars will also be the column that says error bars. There we go. And one thing you might notice is that my error bars are different sizes for different levels of the IV. So for example, my error bars for my IV4 are much bigger than my error bars for my IV5. And that makes some sense, right? Because for my value for 4 is much bigger than my value for 5. And what this is saying is taking into account is the fact that there's a lot more variance amongst my trials for this level of the IV than there are for this level of the IV. And that might be something that you can use to find outliers in your data set or to explain why your graph doesn't fit the shape you expect it to fit. So at this point, I am done graphing. This is what my graph should look like. You should be able to discuss the trend that you see in the graph, connect it back to your hypothesis, and be able to kind of quantitatively describe how your IV and your DV relate to one another. For example, with my data, I might say that my independent and dependent variable have a positive linear relationship. As my independent variable increases, my dependent variable increases at the same rate. I might, if I'm in IB Physics 2, and I did a really good job with my background statement, I should be able to say what this value for my slope and the value for my intercept relate to in real life. For folks in IB Physics 1, you have that to look forward to, but you don't have to worry about that yet. So with that, this is everything you need to know about graphing for your IA, / your science fair project. So with that, I'm gonna let you all go. Best of luck and happy graphing.